July 18th, 2019 should have been an ordinary day at Studio One. As artists were settling into their workspaces, animators were discussing weekend plans over coffee with the gentle buzz of creativity which had defined Kyoto Animation Studio for decades. But unfortunately, this date would be etched into everyone's memories for all of the wrong reasons, as we were about to witness the worst mass killing in decades, which had occurred at Kyoto Animation. Everyone knows that the anime industry is notorious for crushing its workers under impossible deadlines and poverty wages, but Kyoto Animation stood as something almost mythical. It was a company that actually cared about the animators that it employed, and it didn't treat them like disposable workers. KyoAni offered full-time salaries, reasonable working hours, and genuine career development for its staff. The irony here cuts deep, as this was a studio that created stories about friendship, hope, and the beauty of everyday life. Their workplace embodied these same values. On the morning of the 18th of July 2019, all of that will be tested when a purely evil arsonist walked through their unlocked front door. They were carrying 40 liters of gasoline, and within their head was an unhinged delusion, which resulted in destroying everything that KyoAni had built. Kyoto Animation treated their employees like human beings, while the rest of the anime industry operated like digital sweatshops. It was founded by Hideaki and Yoko Hata in 1981, and this wasn't some corporate cash grab. It was a genuine attempt to improve the animation industry, proving that it could be both profitable and humane to its workers. Where other studios relied on freelance animators scrambling for their work, often earning as little as 200 yen per drawing, KyoAni put everyone on their full-time salary. This meant that their employees had benefits, maternity leave, and the radical concept of going home at a decent time. They maintained nearly 50% female staff in an industry that is usually dominated by males. KyoAni's impact upon the anime industry was undeniable. The melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya redefined what anime could be. K-On! Turned cute girls drinking tea into a meditation on friendship. Then the movie A Silent Voice tackled bullying and disability with insane levels of sensitivity, proving that anime could address serious topics without losing its soul. Studio One of KyoAni housed the beating heart of this operation. The three-story building near Rokujizo Station looked ordinary from the outside, but inside it was full of creativity. Employees worked barefoot on tatami mats, they took naps whenever they needed, and they collaborated across different departments. The unlocked doors during business hours represented everything that KyoAni had believed about openness, community, and trust. Shinji Aoba was a case study in how modern Japanese society fails its most vulnerable members. Born in 1978, his life reads like a steady decline from his troubled childhood to then becoming a dangerous adult. He had divorced parents, he suffered from social isolation, and he had multiple dead-end jobs, and even a criminal record that included robbing a convenience store with a kitchen knife back in 2012. After serving 3.5 years in prison, Aoba emerged more broken than before. His father's suicide in 2009 had severed his last family connection that he had, and by 2016 he was living alone in a cramped Saitama apartment, surviving on welfare funds while diving deeper into anime and video games. Neighbors avoided the unwashed man who blasted music at all hours of the day, as he was prone to get into violent rages over minor inconveniences. Aoba submitted multiple novels to KyoAni's writing contest between 2017 and 2018, all featuring high school students, and all promptly were rejected in the first round of these competitions. Any rational person would have moved on or tried a bit harder. Aoba instead began constructing an elaborate fantasy where KyoAni had stolen his work that he had submitted in those competitions. The breaking point came while watching Tsurune, a KyoAni 2018 anime centered around archery. One throwaway scene showed characters buying discounted meat, and this is a common trope that appears in countless different shows. To Aoba's fractured mind, this was the smoking gun evidence that KyoAni had stolen his work. His delusion had found its target. The planning for what he was about to do was methodical and chilling, as Aoba traveled to Kyoto 3 days early, conducting surveillance on Studio One. He purchased gasoline, claiming that he needed it for a generator, and he transported it via handcart, and later he had even told police that he expected to receive the death penalty for his pre-planned actions. So you can't argue that this was a sudden break from reality. It was a calculated act of terrorism that was born from narcissistic rage. On the fateful morning of the 18th of July 2019, NHK was scheduled to film promotional material at Studio One. President Hatta was across town preparing for this interview when his whole world had collapsed. At exactly 10:31 AM, Shinji Aoba pushed through the unlocked front doors like death itself. 70 people were inside the building at the time, going about their morning routines when their whole world had exploded into a nightmare. Aoba wheeled his cart of gasoline through the entrance, screaming "die" in Japanese, as he began dousing everything that he could see, including floors, walls, and horrified employees who had tried to stop him. When he then flicked his lighter, the gasoline vapors didn't just catch fire, they detonated. The explosion blew out windows and created an instant furnace that transformed the ground floor of Studio One KyoAni into an impassable death trap. Unfortunately, the building's wooden frame construction and lack of sprinkler systems, which are legal for small office buildings, had turned Aoba's gasoline into a perfect storm of destruction. Fire raced up the building's single spiral staircase with terrifying speed, following the path that dozens of employees were now desperately trying to climb down to escape. The first moments during a fire determine everything. Employees on the first floor had seconds to react before smoke and flames had cut off their escape routes. Those higher up faced an impossible choice of jumping from the second and third story windows, or alternatively try reaching the roof through a stairwell rapidly filling with toxic smoke. Many chose to jump, suffering broken bones and severe burns, but still surviving. The stairwell became a funnel of death as 19 people were found collapsed there. Their bodies told a story of a desperate final push for survival that had just come up short. The roof access door that should have meant salvation remained closed, whether from mechanical failure or panic, as those final meters to safety became an impassable gap for the staff members. Outside, Shinji Aoba himself had become a human torch. Setting the gasoline ablaze while standing in the fumes left him burned, with 90% burns all over his body. He stumbled into the street screaming about plagiarism before collapsing to the ground. Two KyoAni employees, despite their own trauma and injuries, chased him down and helped police apprehend the arsonist who had just destroyed their world. The fire raged on for 5 hours. 30 fire engines battled flames that reached nearly 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. Windows exploded outward as smoke could be seen pouring into the summer sky for hours. Slowly, we began to learn about the unprecedented loss of life following this unhinged attack. The body count emerged slowly, as each confirmation was another dagger to the heart. In total, 34 people died initially, but then this quickly became 35 as victims had started to succumb to their injuries. Finally, we had the number of 36 individuals who had passed away when the last hospitalized victim had died in October of 2019. 34 others were left injured. Some were so severely burnt that identification was required via DNA testing that stretched on for weeks. There were 20 women and 14 men, ages ranging from 22 years old with recent graduate Yuki Kasama to 61-year-old animation legend Yoshiji Kigami. These victims were far from just numbers. They were the soul of Japanese animation at the time. Yasuhiro Takemoto, 47, director of classics like The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya and Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Futoshi Nishiya, 37, character designer for the Free franchise, whose art had touched millions of fans worldwide. Yuka Kasama was living her dream of working in animation. Her mother later shared how Yuka had loved drawing since childhood and had entered university specifically to join the anime industry. Now her dreams laid buried in the rubble of KyoAni Studio One, along with decades of irreplaceable animation materials and computer data. President Hideaki Hata's discovery of the scene broke something fundamental in a man who'd spent his life building something beautiful. Racing from his business meeting when he saw smoke on the horizon, he had found his employees scattered in the streets, blackened with soot and trauma. The building that he and his wife had so lovingly created as a family-orientated workplace was now a charred skeleton of what it once was. That night, his son found him sitting alone in an empty parking lot, unable to process the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. Japan itself was reeling from this violent act. This was a country where mass shootings were virtually unknown, where public safety was taken for granted. The idea that someone could walk into a beloved animation studio and commit mass murder on this scale challenged everything that the nation believed about itself. The response following this incident was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the news breaking, fans worldwide began mobilizing support for KyoAni and the victims' families. What followed was one of the largest grassroots fundraising efforts in response to a criminal attack. Ultimately, fans of Kyoto Animation raised over $32 million from more than 100,000 donors across the globe. Sentai Filmworks launched a GoFundMe campaign with a target of $750,000. It hit $1 million in 24 hours and it just kept climbing, eventually reaching $2.3 million. But the real surprise came from Japan itself, where individual donations to KyoAni's official bank account had reached 3.3 billion yen, roughly $30 million. Music legend Yoshiki of X-Japan contributed 10 million yen, game developer Key matched that amount. World leaders responded personally, from Canada's Prime Minister to Taiwan's President, recognizing that this attack targeted global cultural heritage. The Japanese government had ended up passing special legislation making all donations to KyoAni tax exempt. This was the first ever time that such a thing had happened within Japanese corporate history. Kyoto Animation made a decision that stunned the entire business world as they revealed that 100% of donations would go directly to the victims and their families, not a single yen for reconstruction, despite facing estimated rebuilding costs of 10 billion yen. When asked about this choice, company leadership simply stated that their people mattered more than their buildings. Miraculously, a concrete enclosed server on the first floor survived this fire, preserving years of digital artwork and proving that not everything beautiful had been destroyed in this attack. Of the 33 survivors from Studio One, 27 returned to work by October 2019. Fast forwarding a few years, in 2025, Kyoto Animation employs over 200 people, more than before the attack. They released major new works including Violet Evergarden the movie and Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S. Shinji Aoba's path to execution was prolonged by the very violence that he had unleashed. With over 90% of his body burned, he required 10 months of intensive medical treatment, including 12 skin graft surgeries, before police could formally arrest him in May of 2020. Japan's first use of experimental artificial skin on such extensive burns had kept him alive for his day of reckoning. The trial that began in September of 2023 became a landmark case for mass violence prosecution in Japan. There were over 32 hearings. Prosecutors argued that despite Aoba's delusional beliefs about plagiarism, he retained his mental capacity to understand the severity of his actions and their consequences. The defense countered that severe mental illness had rendered Shinji incompetent. On the 25th of January 2024, Judge Keisuke Masuda delivered the death sentence. The judge had ruled that while Aoba had suffered from mental illness, his delusions did not prevent him from understanding the criminality and consequences of mass murder. The unprecedented scale of the victims, with 36 dead, made this the ultimate penalty that was inevitable for him under Japanese law. Aoba initially appealed but withdrew his appeal on the 28th of January 2025. Even after withdrawing his appeal, Aoba's lawyers attempted one final maneuver in January 2025, asking courts to nullify the withdrawal, a desperate move that failed, thus sealing Aoba's fate. The death sentence is now final, thus bringing legal closure to a case that traumatized a nation and forever changed the anime industry. The ripple effects of this arson attack spread far beyond one burning building in Kyoto. New national regulations were implemented on the 1st of January 2020, thus requiring gas stations to maintain detailed records of gasoline purchases. This includes customer identification, purpose documentation, and quantity tracking. The method Aoba used to obtain his weapon of mass destruction was now systematically closed off. Animation studios industry-wide have now abandoned their traditional open culture. Public story submissions have also ended, entrance controls have been tightened, and the accessibility that had once made Japanese creative industries unique had given way to security measures that protected artists but distanced themselves from their fans. KyoAni's continued success while maintaining progressive employment policies sends a message to the anime industry that is still plagued by animator exploitation. That you can still treat people well, and it isn't just morally right, it's economically smart, as KyoAni has proved. A permanent memorial for those who had lost their lives was unveiled in 2024. It features 36 white birds spiraling upwards into the sky, one bird for each of the victims. But the real memorial is the company itself, still creating beautiful animation with the same values that had made it a target in the first place. Their motto is inscribed on the monument as it states, "Passing dreams and passion from one person to the next." And this is exactly what Kyoto Animation is still doing. Every new hire is trained with dignity, every anime produced without crushing deadlines, every story that celebrates human connection, and this is the best way that the animation studio can pay its respect to those who had lost their lives on the 18th of July 2019. An evil arsonist destroyed a building and took precious lives, but it could not kill the dream of creating something better. Let me know your thoughts about the tragic Kyoto Animation fire incident. Was there anything that I've forgotten to mention about this incident? Do let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next one.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.